Welcome to Arizona Archaeological and Historical Society's virtual tour of the Mattock site and the Mimbres Cultural Heritage Site in southwestern New Mexico. I personally am excited to revisit an area that I worked in with the Mimbres Foundation in the 1970s. Prior to the 1970s, many archaeologists advised Steve LeBlanc, who was director and founder of the Mimbres Foundation, that there really was little to learn from the Mimbres, that because of the extensive looting for people in order to get the pots, the beautiful pots that we're all familiar with, there was nothing left, that the archaeological remains in the Mimbres area were basically gone. I think, as this presentation and others will point out, work by the Mimbres Foundation and Texas A&M University and the University Nevada at Las Vegas, among others, have proved the skeptics wrong. This virtual tour, I think, is noteworthy in two ways. First, I think you'll be, like me, really impressed with what a group of local avocationalists have done. They've done it with their own efforts, their own sweat and their own treasure. They didn't have any governmental or institutional funding for their work. And they've done a lot. After Steve LeBlanc, who was one of the founders of the Nature's Archaeological Conservancy, secured the site in perpetuity, the local group built interpretive trails. They organized a museum. They host a series of educational programs, and they've rehabilitated some historical buildings to be future research for future researchers. Now, for those of us who remember what we called the back house, we are amazed to see what they have done. It was quite a pit when we were living there. And so we really need to congratulate this local group of avocationalists. The second reason I think this is noteworthy, this is one of the few efforts that I know that is a collaboration of two different archaeological societies in two different states, Arizona and New Mexico. There are lots of avocational societies throughout the United States and Canada, and more collaborative efforts, I think, would result in some really wonderful things. Today's tour guides are Marilyn Markel, who first learned about the Mimbres in a directed readings class at the University of New Mexico with Linda Cordell. She is a longtime resident of the Mimbres Valley and is one of the core people in developing and maintaining the Mimbres Cultural Heritage Site. And she particularly enjoys the educational activities with the young kids in the area to build interest in the local region and pride in the local region. Her work has been so important that the Society for American Archaeology awarded her its leading prize for avocational archaeologists. So we're happy to have Marilyn here. Pat Gilman is retired professor emerita of the University of Oklahoma. She has spent over 4 decades working on the Mimbres tradition, both in the Mimbres Valley and largely to the west of the Mimbres in the more hinterlands, to understand what this Mimbres thing is. Of special note for this talk is she and Steve LeBlanc published in 2017 a book, Mimbres Life and Society, the Mattock site in southwestern New Mexico, available from the University of Arizona Press. And it is the most comprehensive site report for a Mimbres site that has existed. So without further comments, let's get Marilyn, the tour guides, to give you a tour, introduce themselves, gives a tour, and then let's go.
Well, good morning, and welcome to the Mimbres.
And good morning from me. I'm in Tucson. We're supposed to say that we recorded this video that you're about to see in mid-December on a beautiful day in the Mimbres Valley. And so it's not very old. Both Marilyn and I will be back after the video to answer questions and make comments and whatnot. See you then.
Welcome to the Mimbres Culture Heritage Site. I'm Marilyn Markel.
And I'm Pat Gilman.
And our plan today is to give you a tour of the heritage site, starting with the Mattocks Archaeological site, which is north of the houses. And then we have these two wonderful historic New Mexico territorial adobe houses that were built in 1880s and the 1890s. And we're going to feature a lot of the education that we do on site.
And I'm going to talk about the archaeology of the Mimbres and of the Mattocks site. I was the crew chief for the Mimbres Foundation for the excavations here at the Mattocks site from 1974 through 1976, a long time ago. And so I'm in charge of the archaeology. Marilyn's going to talk about the education and what the avocational archaeologists have done here to the buildings and to the site to allow interpretation for the public and education for kids, which is really important stuff.
And we plan on going totally through the site with our guests here today, and then we'll be coming back to the houses. So we're at the entrance to the Mattocks Archaeological site, and I just wanted to mention that the Mattocks site and one of the historic houses here are on the National Register of Historic Places. And then this sign here is just a reflection of some of the education that we do here. We had groups from the Youth Conservation Corps from Aldo Leopold Charter School that has spent a lot of time doing education here. And then on this side, just want to mention that as we go through the site, you're going to see a lot of repurposed satellite dishes. And this is part of our education program. The students from a local school have painted all of the discs for us. And you'll see those on the highway in the area and then here at the site.
So we're here on the Mattocks site, on the south end of the Mattocks site. The Mattocks site is on the first terrace, on the first bench, above the Mimbres River. And the Mimbres River is running from north to south, behind us here. And it flows year-round, unlike most rivers now in the southwest. The Mimbres River still flows. People have lived in this area for certainly more than 2,000 years, in this area in particular, and in other spots in the Mimbres Valley. For example, across the river, on the top of that steep, very steep hill over there, are 11 or 12 pit houses. You can see the depressions on the top of the hill that were the pit houses, and they date from AD 200 to 750, in that range. We aren't entirely sure. We have some radiocarbon dates, but they're on the early end. And that's called the early pit house period. Plainware pottery, a little bit of red slipped pottery, that's all. But these were clearly the ancestors of the people who built later pit houses, which are usually underneath these Mimbres Pueblos, and then who built the Mimbres Pueblos themselves. So the Mattocks site is a Mimbres Pueblo. That is, it has surface rooms arranged in room blocks, in blocks of rooms like our apartment buildings, and it has this is one of the ways Mattocks is different than every other classic Mimbres site, and that is it has very few pit houses underneath it, earlier pit houses. In fact, most of the pit houses on this site date to the same time, the classic period, 1000 AD to 1130 AD, as the Pueblo rooms do, which is pretty interesting. Most of the other big classic sites, and by big I mean more than 100 rooms, and there are 12 or 13 of them here in the Mimbres Valley. There are 12 or 13 of them outside the Mimbres Valley. Most of those other ones have really large pit house occupations underneath them. For example, the Galaz site, which is the next site to the south, about 3 miles south of here, has probably 50, maybe more, pit houses underneath it. There are 12 here at Mattocks, and as I say, they mostly date to the same time period that the Pueblo rooms date to. The classic period, Mimbres classic period, 1000 to 1130, is the time when you get the most beautiful black on white pottery. And I think most people watching this video are going to be familiar with it, especially the figurative, the people, the animals that are painted on it. More common is geometric pottery with very intricate geometric designs on the pottery. That pottery was only painted a maximum of 130 years, that style of pottery. It probably was painted for less than that, honestly. There are black on white types of pottery before that, but they aren't the same, and they don't have nearly the number of figurative designs on them as the classic does.
This place is special.
Well, the Maguillon is special in
Yeah.
ways that archaeologists don't recognize.
Right.
They think it's just a sort of southern extension of
right.
ancestral Pueblo. And they may be right. I mean, because we don't know who the descendants are. But, okay, so I pointed out the McAnally site earlier, and I said that we have radiocarbon dates from up there that date to AD 200-ish. I want to make the point that people lived here in this immediate area for over 1,000 years. That is, slightly less than 1,000 years. They started up there, and they were certainly in the area before that, but we know they started up there, and then eventually they moved down onto this first terrace along the Mimbres River, where the 12 or 13 sites that I talked about earlier are, and built rectangular pit structures, and then built these Pueblo surface structures. This is, I call these Pueblos, and they are, but these are unlike the Pueblos in the ancestral Pueblo area to the north, Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, for example, because people lived here for so long, for 1,000 years, for example. In the north, people did not live in the same place for that long a period of time. In fact, they moved pretty regularly after 2 or 3 generations often. The Maguillon area, as opposed to the ancestral Pueblo area, has that distinction. And I think that's an important distinction to recognize in the southwestern United States, northwestern Mexico. Okay, all right.
Good. So, about 10 years ago, we decided that we were going to interpret the site, and one of the important features of the site is the archaeology history. This sign is about that, the history of archaeologists excavating here at the site. So they excavated in 1929, 30, and 31, Beloit College, the Logan Museum in Wisconsin, and then in the 1970s, the Mimbres Foundation. That's one of the important parts of this site that we always want to tell people about, is the importance of the Mattocks site to Mimbres archaeology in general. One of the main reasons being that over 230 tree ring dates came from this site. So we have a clear idea of the chronology of the Mimbres time period because of the work that the archaeologists have done here, mainly in the 1970s.
And that archaeology was done by the Mimbres Foundation that Steve LeBlanc started in the early mid-1970s, specifically to come out here and excavate Mimbres sites. What you need to know is that in the 1970s, most archaeologists who had any knowledge of Mimbres at all thought that all of the sites had been looted so badly that there was nothing left, that there was nothing worth excavating. And they thought Steve was a fool for coming out and doing this. Our first excavations in 1974 were at a smallish site called the Mitchell site, upriver here a ways. 15, 20, 25 rooms, and we couldn't make heads or tails of it. We couldn't find wall alignments, we couldn't find floors, we couldn't find anything intact. But some of us came down here to the Mattock site and went to other sites here in the valley. And it turns out that there was quite a bit that Paul Nesbitt from Beloit College didn't excavate, that looters hadn't dug up here. And we got a lot of information from the Mattock site that, as Marilyn says, and I think I can say too, that that has been important in understanding Mimbres archaeology and moving our knowledge forward here. And so even on sites that don't look very good in terms of the looting, there is often material still left. However, what has happened on a few sites here in the valley, including the Galaz site, 3 miles downriver, which was probably one of the 2 ritual sites in the valley. That site was bulldozed in the 1970s, and there is literally, therefore, nothing left to it. And so there's hand looting, and then there's bulldozing.
And that could have happened to the Mattocks,
Yeah.
but fortunately the Mimbres Foundation, Steve LeBlanc, got together with other interested people, formed a nonprofit group, and saved the Mattocks. The 2 territorial houses just came with the property, but it now has, we are able to offer a venue for education for the entire Mimbres area.
Okay, yeah. We're not talking too much, are we?
By the time that we get out to this area on the site, most people look out this direction and say, okay, where is it? Where's the Pueblo? And I tell them that it's still there, it's just buried underneath the dirt to protect it, because archaeologists always backfill when they're finished with their projects for preservation. One of the things I also tell people when we get to this sign is that there are still thousands and thousands of artifacts in place on the site that live here. And for example, we have this well-used mono, a grinding stone here, that was found when we put in this post. So it lives at the base of the sign right here. The next sign we're going to go to is talking about the 400s room block, and Pat is going to explain a little bit about what they found way back in the 70s about that room block.
So the 400s room block is this very low mound right out in here. It has 10-ish rooms in it. It's not very big. We have a tree ring date from 1079 AD from this room block, and we have a pit house that was built, that was excavated in front of the most recent room in the room block, and it was never finished. So I'm pretty sure it dates to when the people were starting to move out of this room block. I think somebody came in and thought they would live in an easier structure to live in because it's insulated by the ground that it's excavated, that it's dug into. But it was never finished. There's no hearth, there's no fire pit, there's no roof on it, there's no nothing. It's just a big hole in the ground outside the door into the latest room in the room block. So I think people's concept of these room blocks is that every room was being lived in at the same time. That that there were people in every room, there were families in every room. But we have learned from the tree ring dates on this room block and on the 100s room block that's over to the side there, that it looks like people start a family, a small family, like a nuclear family perhaps, mom, dad, and the kids, start in a single room that perhaps has a storage room attached, or perhaps has another living room attached. Things are, I think, are pretty flexible. And when that couple starts to have kids, and those kids grow up and have their own children, then they add on suites of rooms. Eventually the founding couple will die, and will probably be buried in the original room that they lived in, while their descendants are living in a suite of rooms next to them, and then another suite of rooms further on. So I think these sets of rooms are occupied sequentially rather than all at once. That has important implications for the numbers of people living here at the site. That is, there aren't so many of them. There's one family per room block, in my opinion. Other people have different opinions about what's happening, other archaeologists. It makes for interesting conversations. However, at other sites, it does appear that there are often more than one family in some of the room blocks. Every site is different. There are no quintessential Mimbres sites.
While we're here at the 400s room block, we wanted to mention the wonderful model that our volunteer Bill Hudson has put together, several models on the site to help explain to people what these room blocks look like. And this was a really special room block because indications, suggestions of ramadas were found. So we've put some replica ramadas on the site. So these two, but also some of the most amazing Mimbres pottery was found in these rooms, a 400 room block, including the stylized bighorn sheep that we chose to use as our logo here at the heritage site, and also one that we call our Escher pot. Our young man here that's filming is named Escher, so I'd like to mention that the artist Escher is also mentioned quite often here because of the pottery, the negative pottery, black and white, beautiful pots that were found here at the Mattocks. One of them, a stylized man and a crane, we think a water bird. Those pots, replica pots that are actually gourds, that we had our wonderful gourd artist produce for us, are on display in the houses that people can see.
So these models are just wonderful because you've seen that the room blocks don't look like anything anymore. And so what Bill did was he took maps of the room blocks and he made them into pueblos, and he included the ramadas that we've talked about, but he's also included artifacts like metates that were found on the roofs, for example, and this sort of thing. I think there's some stuff in the ramadas there as well, so that people walking around the site can get a sense of what these room blocks must have looked like when people were actively living in them. It's very hard on Mimbres sites to get that sense, and these models do the job, and they're just so cool. Okay.
They are cool.
They are. I've never seen anything like them. So we're here at the Great Kiva on the site. This Great Kiva probably dates into the AD 900s, right before they start building the surface room blocks here at the site. As I've said, there aren't many pit houses that would be contemporary with the Great Kiva here at the site, but in the 200s room block, which is in that direction, which is one of the two largest room blocks on the site, probably 25, 30-ish rooms. There is a pit house that is probably contemporary with this Great Kiva, and so probably that family built the Great Kiva and was in charge of the ceremonies that would have happened in the Great Kiva, is my best guess. And people would have come from other sites, from other villages, to participate in these ceremonies. Every big site in the Mimbres Valley would have had a Great Kiva and would have had ceremonies at different times of the year, of course. This is Bill's replica of the Great Kiva. It is a rectangular structure, and it has a ramp entryway. You would start on the ground surface and you would walk down a ramp into the Great Kiva. There also may have been a ladder entryway over the hearth, a hole in the roof over the hearth. And we're going to walk over to the Great Kiva. You can see the depression here. While we're in this area, though, one of the ways that we started on this archaeological site in 1974, when we didn't know anything about Mimbres archaeology and how to excavate it usefully and efficiently, we looked for wall alignments, lines of rocks, and these are unshaped river cobbles from the Mimbres River. These are not Chaco-shaped sandstone, beautiful blocks. These are unshaped river cobbles, and we found what we always have called the Great Wall. It's the western wall of the 200s room block, and Marilyn is going to walk along it. It's tens of meters long, and we started on the east side of it. Things were pretty looted, but it gave us a starting point into the 200s room block, which was pretty both looted and heavily excavated by Paul Nesbitt. Marilyn and I are standing in the center of the Great Kiva. It's about 10 meters on a side. We at the Mimbres Foundation came back in 1978. We didn't have a clue what this was. We came back in 1978 for a week and put a test trench into this Great Kiva. The floor is a couple meters down, but you can see that it's still there's a big depression here. So this was both a big structure and a deep structure. A structure that would have held tens of people, certainly, perhaps more than that. And this was some sort of community gathering place, ceremonial structure, that sort of thing. It is essentially unexcavated, though, perhaps awaiting future archaeologists. So this behind me is a pile of rubble, of wall rocks, of the rocks that they collected in the Mimbres River, cobbles, left them unshaped, that they made walls, pueblo walls of. In this case, Bill Hudson, who has figured out more than I figured out on the site, honestly, says that this is room 43 that Nesbitt excavated, and it was a pit structure. That is, the walls were dropped below the ground surface, a meter and a half, and the walls were lined, in this case, with cobbles. So they were building cobble walls underground before they built them full height on the surface. This is the kind of thing, though, that we had a really hard time interpreting. This is just a pile of rubble here. We put some test trenches on the far side of it. We weren't able to interpret what we were seeing in the test trenches, and it took Bill later on to figure out that this is room 43. This exemplifies the difficulty of doing Mimbres archaeology in a previously excavated site, in a looted site, that sort of thing, and in a site where the walls are made of river cobbles and not of finely constructed sandstone blocks. So I'm standing here near the south end of the Mattocks site, and you can see behind me what somebody just said, you can see what you don't see on Classic Mimbres sites. That is, it looks like an overgrown, cleared area, but in fact there are room blocks out there with many thousands of artifacts and much information about how people lived here on this site and here in the Mimbres Valley for hundreds and hundreds of years. This The artifacts that we excavated, the Mimbres Foundation excavated, are all curated at the Maxwell Museum of Anthropology at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. They have all remained in state, of course. And Stephen LeBlanc and I have co-authored a book that's many hundreds of pages on our excavations here at the Mattocks site that the University of Arizona Press has published. That book also includes all the information we could put together about Nesbitt's excavation. Nesbitt published a book, quite a thin book, in 1931 on his excavations. He didn't include his last year of excavation, and we tried to pull everything together from notes that he left at the Logan Museum at Beloit College in Wisconsin, and the artifacts from his excavations are there. So the artifacts are well taken care of, along with our field notes, maps, and other things that go along with a scientific excavation at an archaeological site. One of the things I'd like to emphasize here is that the artifacts, both from Nesbitt's excavations and from the Mimbres Foundation's excavations, are available to researchers, to archaeological researchers, but they're also available for exhibits that are open to the public. The artifacts that the looters extracted from these sites are who knows where. They're certainly not available to researchers. Many of them have been sold, and they have gone overseas to Germany and Japan, would be major places that Mimbres pots have gone over the years, and they are not available, and they can no longer tell us anything about how people lived here in the Mimbres Valley 1,000 years ago.
I'm standing at the entrance to what we call the Gooch House. It was a man by the name of Benjamin Gooch that we think built this house in the early 1890s. The older house is the back house that we'll go to in a minute, and that was built by Dr. Granville Wood in 1882. We know the house was here in 1883 because the pioneering archaeologist Adolf Bandelier visited Dr. Wood and wrote about the Wood ruin that he visited, which of course we call the Mattocks ruin. He wrote about that in 1883. This house is quite historic because it was built in that territorial time period, and we have now turned it into a small museum. Our library was in here, but now we've moved it to the back house, and we have a wonderful gift shop that pretty much helps us pay the bills here. One of the things I want to emphasize during this whole production is that this whole place is run by volunteers and by donations. We have no state funding or anything like that, so it's an all volunteer organization here. So let's go on into the house. We'll go through the visitor shop and then into the museum. Open. So this is our gift shop. We have volunteers like Linda that man the gift shop for us. And then we have this wonderful historic room that comes next. And our goal in this room was to talk about the history of the Mimbres Valley. So we start not only with the Mimbres room that we'll be visiting, but also we have an area here that's devoted to the Apache time period. Then we have the Hispanic time period, the mining time period, because we have the town of Georgetown. The mining boom town is very near here, and the mining mill was just down the road. And then we have the ranching and homestead area featured. And then we come into what we call our members room. And in this room, we have artifacts from the Mimbres area, including this fabulous display of pots that are replica pots that are actually gourds that these pots came from the Mattocks site. So our gourd artist Pierre Nichols replicated as closely as possible to some of the pots that you'll see in museums in other places, the real thing. And here we have these wonderful replica pot gourds that we can talk to people about. For example, here is the pot that came from the 400s room block that we use as our logo. And some other just amazing pots from the Mattocks site. We also have this amazing model of the site that our volunteer Bill Hudson made for us. So this shows the interpretive trail where it goes through the site, and then all of the different room blocks that we just talked about out on the site. We're here on the porch of the Gooch House here at the Mimbres Culture Heritage Site, and one of the most important parts of what we do here at the Mimbres Culture Heritage Site is that we do education. We provide education for school groups and also any of our young visitors. And since this is a Sunday, and of course we're not allowed school groups here at this point in time because of the virus, we have our friend Aiden. He's a local boy that lives just down the road, but he also comes over and volunteers his time when we have any kinds of events here, and he demonstrates some of the activities we do with the school groups. So right now Aiden is making a clay pot, and he's using the coil and scrape method because that's the type of pottery that the Mimbres people made. And so Aiden, can you make a coil for us? So he's rolling the clay in his hands to make a coil, and he's going to add it to the pot that he's been working on. And he's also already made this little pot right here. So Aiden, can you just, show us how you put a coil. I'm out here at the 200s block of the site, and we wanted to show this area again because this is a really special area for education. We allow students to go out into the 200s room block when we have school groups here, and they pin flag artifacts. So today our young friend Aiden is looking for some artifacts. He has a pin flag, and then he's going to sketch that artifact, because of course we teach all of the kids that all of the artifacts belong on the site. We don't remove them. They learn to leave artifacts not only on the Mattocks site but any other sites that they visit, and that's of course to preserve and protect the site. So Aiden is out here looking for a sherd. Did you find something? Okay, so he's been very careful not to step on the sherds, and he has found one artifact, and what he's doing is sketching the artifact just like archaeologists do when we record artifacts on a site. And this is a very important aspect of what we do, because we teach kids, of course, that to leave the artifacts behind, just to photograph them, sketch them, record them, and then leave them where they belong. Good job, Aiden. I'm here standing in front of what we call the wood house, and these days I'm calling it the Hudson Wood House, because Bill Hudson has done so much extraordinary volunteer work here on this back house, fixing it up, and then also on the models of the site and other things. But the wood house is quite historic because it was built by a Dr. Granville Wood in the 1880s, and he put in a large vegetable garden, a lot of fruit trees, and he lived a good life here, but he was a practicing physician. So this little room right here is our historic doctor's office that we can't go in right now because right now we're using it for storage, but it will be open again. So we have the little doctor's office, and then also I wanted to talk about this part of the house because it's quite historic in that this house was built at the height of the Apache Wars. So we have our Apache sign here to talk about that occupation. But these little windows at the top of the wall here, those are actually gun ports, which reflect that Apache raiding time period that this house was built. Another important feature about this room is it was used as a storage room by the Beloit College archaeologists that were here in 1929, 30, and 31. And we have a little video of them coming in and out of this door of this house. So this house is quite historic, and we have been working on fixing it up, rehabbing it lately, and that's what we want to show you next, is that this house has become the Mimbres Archaeological Research and Education Center. Every summer that archaeologists are working here in the valley, they have the opportunity to stay here and use this as a base camp. And that first occurred in 1929, last occurred in 2018, I believe. We have field schools planned on coming here to use the facility in the future, and we think that's a very important part of what we're doing here at the heritage site. Is we are planning on having this wonderful facility open to researchers, so we have a research library. We also have a lab and workroom, and that's what we'll show you next. Well, welcome to the Hudson Wood House. This is our wonderful, amazing, just furnished room in the house. And you can see that we have a sink, workstation. This is going to be our lab workroom for all of the field schools that come and visit, and for the school groups that we have. The local school kids will be coming and utilizing this education center. We also have this huge shelf right here of many of our collections, the Archaeological Society collections of sherds and other artifacts that they've been given over the years. And what we've done is correlate this sherd collection with some of the research materials we have in our library, which we'll show you next. This is a really amazing occurrence because we have been using this house for many years for a lab space, but it wasn't anything like this. So it's sort of amazing to have this. Let's see what else we can say. Eventually, this is going to lead to an actual bathroom here for the field schools, because upstairs we now have a dorm room with 6 beds that will be able to house some of the field school students and the archaeologists that come here in the summers. So, what a beautiful space that we have. So next we're going to go over here into the library, leave our sherd area here, and come into the library, where we're actually going to have many more books because we're getting donations all the time. But right now we have this huge collection of Mimbres materials that have been given to us by people like Dr. Nancy Koinman, who's featured here in a photo on the wall. Dr. Koinman grew up in New Mexico, but then Nancy taught at Iowa State for many, many years, retired to the Mimbres Valley, and then unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But her family and Nancy left us a collection of her books to join the Archaeological Society collection of archives and materials. Nancy's lab table that came all the way from her lab in Iowa State. So we have a large collection of materials that are going to be available for researchers in the future. And that's our goal here, is to provide an education center for local school kids, for school groups from everywhere that might want to come here, but then also for local researchers that are interested in the Mimbres area, the Mimbres Valley. And we hope to just keep expanding what we have. But we're quite pleased to say that now we are open and we have this amazing facility to use for education. To end our tour here, we're again here at the Gooch House, and we just wanted to talk about a few things in summary. The first thing I'd like to mention is that this is a total volunteer operation that we have here. So we have amazing volunteers like Bill Hudson and Marianne Smith and others like Linda, who's over there also. She was in the gift shop. We have just wonderful volunteers that have put their efforts into not only running this place on a day-to-day operation kind of activity, but also we incorporate all of the education that we do here. And that is our main focus, is the education for the local school groups, because we want them to be invested in this site and to care about it and be proud that they're from the Mimbres area. But then we also have visitors from all over the world that come here to visit the heritage site and to see the Mattocks archaeological site.
So I was telling Marilyn a little bit ago that when we came out here 48 years ago under Steve LeBlanc's auspices to excavate on sites in the Mimbres Valley and on the Mattock site, we had no idea that what we did then as 20-something-year-olds would end up being so important to Mimbres archaeology, so important to the archaeology in the Southwest. And what we did here, because Steve LeBlanc preserved this site, he bought this land ultimately and the houses, and preserved all of this. What we did was lay the groundwork so that Marilyn, Bill, Linda, Marianne, others, many others, could do what they're doing in continuing the site preservation and in making this wonderful educational facility here at the Mattock site.
And the last thing that we want to mention is that because of what happened here at the Mattocks, Dr. LeBlanc saving the place, he talked to other people. They got together and ultimately formed what became the Archaeological Conservancy. The Mattock site was the first site that was saved just for preservation by a nonprofit group. That led to the development of the Conservancy, and now over 500 sites are being protected across the United States, but the Mattock site was the first site that happened to. So isn't that amazing?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Thank you so much. Marilyn and Pat, can you join us again? That was wonderful. Thank you, thank you. All right, we have some questions and we're gonna start looking at what those are. So I think you talked about this, but the first question was, are the pit houses located in any particular area of the site or any particular relation to the Pueblo buildings? And I know you answered part of that. Is there anything else you would like to say about that?
The pit houses are not arranged like they would be, say, in the Hohokam area around courtyards that we can tell. There's often one under each room block, but there are very few that date like 3 or 4 or 5 before 1000 AD. Most of the pit houses on the site date to the Classic period, which is very unusual. So no, there's no particular pattern and no particular place on the site that there are pit houses.
Okay. How about, is there anything special about the alignment of the Great Kiva ramp?
Most Great Kivas ramps in the Mogollon area, I'm thinking if this is true, and most pit house ramps for that matter, align someplace between east and south. Who knows what that means? I don't know what that means. You can think the rising sun, but.
And this is the same, or could you tell on this, on your?
Oh yeah, that one's aligned to the east-ish.
Okay. Okay, great. Again, about the Great Kiva. Was the Great Kiva burned or ritually retired like other Kivas in the Mimbres area prior to 1000?
Yeah, Marilyn, did you want to say?
I just said we think so.
We think so. When we put the little test trench in 1978, we went all the way down to the floor, and there was burned roof fall above the floor. And so, yes, we think it was ritually retired.
Good. I'm looking to see if there's anything else related to the kiva. That doesn't look like it. Okay. How about, is there any evidence of interaction between the community at the Mattocks site and the Jornada Mogollon at the Dunlap Salazar site near Capitan?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Is the
No, we
Dunlap
don't know.
Salazar site is the one that Tom Rochek excavated, is that correct? I think it is. And what he excavated is what we would call an early pit house period site. That is the site that's like up on the McAnally Hill, right across the river from Mattocks. And it is plainware and red slipped pottery only. It does not have painted designs on it, and big circular pit structures. And in that sense, yeah, but that pattern of plain pottery and big round pit structures is common across much of the Southwest in that time period.
So that leads into maybe a little bit more about a question that what is the relationship between the Mimbres and the Mogollon?
Mimbres is a branch of the Mogollon. There's 5 or 6 branches traditionally recognized: Point of Pines, Black River, San Simon, Reserve, Mimbres, Jornada, although that one may be separate. And we just use those designations for teaching purposes. We have no idea if they mean anything, if those divisions would have meant anything to the people living at the time, living 1,000, 1,500 years ago. Probably not. And they're mostly based on pottery types and architecture types.
Related, and I know you're both not descendants of the Mimbres, but who do archaeologists believe, or who do local people believe are the descendants of the Mimbres?
That's always a hard question in the Mogollon, because by the time Europeans started recording anything in the region, the Indians, the Native Americans who were in the region were Apaches, who may be a bit descended from these folks. You know, people mix around like we do. And I think that a lot of the Native Americans in the Pueblos today, Zuni, Hopi, for example, might claim descent from the Mimbres, but I wouldn't want to speak for them. They would have to say that themselves. The bottom line is, as archaeologists, we don't know.
Thanks. Could you please discuss the components of the mortar that would make it sufficiently strong to bind together walls made of river cobbles?
Marilyn, you want to do that one?
Well, it's just, just an adobe mud. That's all it is. There's lots of dirt here in the Mimbres, and a lot of it has a clay component to it. So that's all it is. And it really wasn't that architecturally sound, because the remains of the rooms probably collapsed pretty quickly after they weren't being used anymore.
Well, wait a second, Marilyn, you were cutting out. Internet in the Mimbres can be in and out, so
Yes.
maybe you want to answer that. Just do the last part of that again.
Okay, there is a lot of dirt and adobe here in the valley, and of course we have the river right here. So they just got ordinary dirt. These houses are built from local dirt too, in adobe bricks. So lots of dirt.
And they used a lot of that adobe to keep those walls of unshaped stones holding together. There's just a lot of adobe in them.
Great. A question, what is the earliest time frame in which you find slipped wares? I'm assuming in this region.
I think that Laurie Barkwell Love, who wrote her dissertation that included some analysis of the earliest red slipped pottery, which is before you get the painted designs on pottery. I think that she does say that it starts pretty quickly after you get plain pottery, and it's in the AD 300s or so, with early plain pottery, unslipped, undecorated in any way, being AD 100s, 200s or so.
Great, thanks. So a comment came in from Mark Severson.
Hi, Mark.
After you were talking about the kiva, and he says maybe the prevailing wind from the southeast aids the draft for the fire. So, yeah.
Sure.
All right, and then someone's writing, I'm looking at the Logan Museum website at Beloit, and I don't see anything about Mimbres material culture. Were the pieces collected and repatriated? I know that you said the pieces are at another museum, so maybe you could clarify that.
Go ahead, Marilyn. No?
As far as we know, the Beloit College still has a huge collection on display. Bill Hudson was there not that long ago and took more photos for us. So yes, as far as we know, Beloit still has their collection on display.
But what they may have done is they may have taken the burial vessels, for example, off display and off the website. They used to have a website that had Mimbres pottery on it, that I think was a discussion of pottery types in the Southwest. But I'm not sure they ever have had anything on their website about the Mattocks site excavations themselves. Websites are notoriously hard to maintain.
Yes. All right. I think that's what we have for questions. There's one comment another comment by Mark that says, Al Dart, have you ever thought of partnering with the Mimbres Center for Educational Outreach with students? So maybe something will come out of that. Marilyn, that would be awesome.
Yes, Al is a supporter and friend of ours here. He is a member of the grant. Does come visit when he can get out here.
Great. I think what we heard, and it was a little bit hard because again you cut out, that Al Dart is a supporter of the Mimbres Center. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
He's a good friend.
Good. That's great. Oh, there is one other question that popped up. Was the Mattocks site occupied or reoccupied after the Classic period?
Good question. We talk about that kind of thing all the time among all of us who work in the Mimbres. There are sherds that date later in time than 1130 AD, the end of the Classic period, the end of what you see as the Pueblos there. But there don't seem to be any rooms or houses or buildings that associate with those. So we don't, but there are such sites in other parts of the valley, later sites. And so we think people certainly know the site is there, and they're coming to the site maybe to make offerings, maybe to recognize people who had been there before, that sort of thing. Yeah. And they just live elsewhere in the valley, in different places.
Great. So questions are still coming in. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Isn't most of the Mimbres ware burial associated?
The painted, the figurative and the geometric designs are often associated with burials. However, there are tens of thousands of sherds in the midden, in the places where they deposited their trash, from vessels that clearly weren't in burials. And so, you know, the ones that we see are often from burials, but not always, not always. But there are all these other ones that got broken, probably through use, that nobody thinks much about. And so, no, I would say they all, or even most of them, aren't associated with burials. They're associated with everyday life.
Great. I did have a contact in the chat for the Beloit Logan collections. Al Dart put this in here, so I've just put that out to everyone. I hope that you can see that there is a link there to see those collections at the Logan Museum. And I think that is all we have for questions. We have some nice comments in the chat box saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Someone did ask where is the Mimbres? So Marilyn, do you want to explain where that is?
Well, we're here in the Mimbres Valley, which is in southwest New Mexico. We're just east of Silver City. So we're a little bit isolated, but I would encourage anyone that has the opportunity to come visit us, because I personally think Mimbres is paradise.
It was a little cold for those of us from Tucson. It was a little cold for those of us from Tucson, but it's beautiful.
It is. It's well worth a visit.
Yes, definitely.
And there are other things to see as well.
Oh yes.
There's yes, Mimbres. This is just the icing, but there's a lot of cake to see up in the Gila Wilderness and Gila Cliff Dwellings.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
the Lake Roberts
lots
site.
And lots of archaeology.
Yep.
That's great. Good. Okay, so let's see. I think there's a couple of folks. Midge Jolly says she's been there and looks forward to visiting again. Thank you, thank you. And thank you so much for doing this virtual tour for us today, Pat and Marilyn. Do you have some closing comments?
I do. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for being here and listening to our presentation. And that I apologize for saying amazing so much in the video, but I am continually amazed by what we have accomplished here. And at times it's been a struggle. We had big protests by some of the locals. We've had lack of funding, but now we have a terrific group of volunteers and supporters like Kathy Hill and Bill Hudson, and all of our other volunteers, and of course our collaboration with the Grant County Archaeological Society has really benefited the heritage site. And of course, I'd be remiss if I don't mention that we are still looking for donations. We are building a bathroom in the back. Woohoo, a bathroom. And so if you're interested, please go to the GCAS, it's gcasnm.org website, or the Mimbres Culture Heritage Site website. And so thank you so much, Pat and Paul and Fran, for doing this. We appreciate it. And also I want to say thank you to Escher, who is our videographer, and also to my young helper, Aiden Wood. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple of other things that have just come through. This person says, Danita Bynum, yeah, she said, I'm Bob McNally's oldest daughter, and I remember that archaeological digging in the 70s, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And someone asked, Pat, you referred to a person when you were talking about the slips. Lori Barkwell Love, right?
Lori Barkwell Love.
Right.
I don't think she's published that particular part of her dissertation, although she's published other parts of it, and they're all brilliant. Marilyn and I are happy to answer other questions that you may think of, and the way to do that is through an email that Fran will send you. So if you think of other things or you want a reference for Lori, just let us know.
That's great.
And I'd like to mention that we had pit house questions. The Harris site is very close to the Mattocks site, and all the work that Dr. Barbara Roth from UNLV has done on the Harris, you might be interested in looking at that to get more information.
Yeah.
Okay.
About the pit house occupation of the Mimbres.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. For those of you out there, this field trip will be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can watch the video again, and you will receive an email that gives you the information to send questions to me at the AAHS email address, and we'll forward them to Pat or Marilyn if there's more. So thank you very much, everybody. We're glad that you were here. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.